Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Services and Regulation Policy Committee. Welcome to people at home. Let's have some, let's read the script, shall we? The meeting is open to the public. We do not have any items that will require the public to be excluded. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will be available for people to view later. We have received 2 petitions, no public questions, no statements and no questions from members. Can I request mobile phones are off or silent? There's no fire test planned for today. If the fire alarm goes off, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff and assemble at Tudor Square. Let's do introductions. So, as I said, I'm Councillor Joe Otton, member for Dawn Totley, and chair of this committee. Mark.
Mark Russell, Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside, Deputy Chair.
Mark Jones, Councillor for Burngreave.
Mary Lee, Councillor for Darnell Ward.
David Barker will learn to work the microphone one day, but Councillor for Richmond Ward while I'm doing that.
Councillor Peter Gilbert for Ecclesall Ward.
Christine Gilligan, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward and spokesperson on this committee.
Willis Marshall, Councillor for Woodhouse Ward.
Councillor Sue Alston from Fulwood Ward.
Thank you. And let's have officers, starting on my left.
Good morning, Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services.
Morning, Richard Eyre, Director of Streets and Regulations.
Marvellous. And am I right?
And I'm Amanda Clayton, Democratic Services.
Right. And we'll introduce more officers as we meet them. Okay, excellent. Apologies for absence. Well, we're all here, so I think there are no apologies. Item 2, exclusion of public and press, none. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Wave now. No. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. These are on page 11 of the agenda pack. Can we agree these as a correct record? I'll take silence as the assent of the meeting. Thank you, that is agreed. Item 5, public petitions, questions and statements. Do we have either of the petitioners here? So a petition from Sarah Nadeem? No. Do we have a petition for Mohammed Faisal Ansar? No. Okay, well in that case those petitions will be responded to in writing. Item 6, members' questions? None. Item 7, work programme. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Just one change to note since the publication. We discussed moving the street scene district centre management item from the March meeting to a date in the new municipal year to be confirmed. That's all, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I noticed the item core investment programme approval. There's a description that seems to be cut off in the middle of a sentence on page 28, the last item. Is there a full description for that? So I don't know, Richard, can you help us with that?
Chair, it may be the formatting of the Excel sheet that's cut it off halfway through. I'll fix that.
Right. Okay. Well, can we have a note to advise members what the full description of that is? I also noticed that the market strategy annual review is under the name of an officer who's no longer with us and has now been replaced. So if that could be updated. Thank you. Okay. Anything else in the work programme? Anything from members? In that case, can we agree the work programme? Thank you. I'll take silence. There's the assent of the meeting. That is agreed. Item 8, environmental regulation and licensing enforcement policy. Ian, do you want to introduce yourself and present the report? Thank you.
Morning, councillors. I'm Ian Ashman, Assistant Director for Environmental Regulation and Licensing. Shall I introduce the paper then? Yeah. So, as you'll be aware, we've long-term had an enforcement policy as a regulatory service. It's something that we are recommended to have. It's a regulator's code type requirement, and it was something that we did need to review. And we needed to bring in relevant parts of general licensing as well. So my colleague, Dan Wheatman, who's a service manager in our area, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, he'd got a long-standing commitment, has pulled this together for us and worked with a number of services. So what you have before us is largely a statutory document linking to the approaches that we do. It's not a work programme. It doesn't set out exactly where we're going to be intervening in the city or anything like that. That's the sort of thing that you would be getting in our service plans and the reviews that we do as part of general member briefings. This is more just the broader framework that sets out to customers what our approach is, how we go about it, and that some of the tests that we would undertake in terms of dealing with offences and complaints. Obviously, a lot of what we do has got a very clear statutory basis, and you know, there's a lot of legislation and rules that are linked to that. What we have done, though, is that because there wasn't any particular consultation on this, because much of our regulatory work, if we serve an abatement notice, there is an appeal process on that. Obviously, if we prosecute, there's a legal process for that. And when we serve fixed penalties, that's an invitation to discharge an offence through a fixed penalty. People don't have to pay it, they can go to court if they would like. So there's lots of checks and balances built in. But we made a conscious decision that at this point in time, this is not covering taxi licensing, because we know that there are many issues there in terms of current national legislation and where some of the operators can be licensed. And we know that's quite an emotive issue and needs probably quite involved discussions. So we've made a conscious decision at this stage that to be able to refresh this in this timescale, we wouldn't include taxi licences. So that's another piece of work that will be needed to be done, and I'm sure members will understand the reasons for that. So I don't particularly propose to go in any great detail through this. Some changes we have made as a result of comments at briefings, one in particular around CCTV. So the previous enforcement policy didn't mention our approach to CCTV. That obviously is a major issue now in terms of the number of people that have got things like ring doorbells, they've got home security cameras. Many of you will know from our discussions at briefings that this is an issue that comes up a lot. We are presented, as our South Yorkshire Police, with lots and lots of video evidence and things like that. And we needed a bit more of a public statement on this. So that's now within this. It covers large amounts of the work that we would get involved in. And I think the general principle is that under many circumstances, we will be using footage from things like ring doorbells and private CCTV. But there are checks and balances on that, as there would be if we were using CCTV that we were operating. And I think you'll see broadly in this is about being proportionate, accountable, consistent, transparent. We will be endeavouring to put more of our regulatory enforcement action in a public place on the website. We do obviously try to publicise what we can, and ideally we would have more evidence online of all the action that we've taken. And although you can get that often from press reports and things like that, I think it would be good to get that in one place. So I'll pause there if we have any questions.
Thank you. Mark Rosling first, then Mark Jones.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian, and thank the team on behalf of us as well for all the work that's got into it. A couple of things. One leads on from what you've just said. I think it would be very useful for residents to know the full extent of both the prosecutions and the pre-prosecution work that goes in, the FPNs, that kind of stuff, because I think that there is a sense among some residents that they see, for instance, fly tipping, things like that. They don't see the work that goes into preventing it, and they don't see what happens when people are caught. And I think that's really important, that people do know that people are being caught and they are being prosecuted and they are being fined. Particularly if it's people who are thinking of doing this, to know that it's not in any way risk-free. That's the first one. The second point, page 42, it's 2.5, is the use of domestic CCTV, and we've talked about this a lot over the preceding months. I think this is really welcome to set this out. I absolutely acknowledge that there are dangers and there'll be places where we can't use this, but I do think where people have got evidence of someone in their community making a mess of their community and the evidence is clear, we should use whatever evidence we have to bring those people to account. So I think it's really, really positive. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for this, Ian. I know that we've spoken many times about CCTV and what can and can't be accepted. Just for my own views, my own information more than anything, is it still the case that if someone is surveilling someone inappropriately by invading their privacy, is that still the police's regime to deal with, or does that fall on us, or is that covered within our regulations?
So there's a really good bit of case law on this that I circulated to lead the three lead members, and I can circulate it wider if necessary, that sets out a recent case where this came up. It depends exactly on what the nature of it is, but if it's seen as harassment, I mean, there could be a couple of ways of dealing with it. One could be down an ASB route. One could be a complaint to the Information Commissioner's Office. What we find from that is that whilst they may provide some advice, they may tend not to physically intervene in minor infringements. So to give you an example, in the case law that there is, although it was at, I believe it was at a county court, so there's limits to how much you can read into this. But that particular individual had a camera that pointed in the street. It was like a Ring doorbell. I'm sure there are other cameras available. And they were picturing the neighbour as they walked past. Now, they didn't have all the relevant documentation for that, as I understand it. But the judge in that case felt that there wasn't sufficient there to have been breaching that individual's rights. What they were more concerned about was where, for example, there are microphones on these cameras, and it's picking up people's conversations on their front doorstep and in their garden, and I think that's seen as more. So I think in that, although that was a private prosecution, if there was something like that, that would be an option. So you could go down a private prosecution route, or you could potentially go down a harassment route and speak to the police about it. But certainly the Information Commissioner's Office, I've not come across a case where they've physically sent someone out.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll save comment on that. So I've got Sue, Christine and Mary next. Sue.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, then I might just make a comment about the CCTV. So my questions are more sort of just factual, really. I was just looking at the various options we've got for penalties, and obviously we all hope we don't need to use them because we hope the fact that they exist stops people doing the wrong thing. However, I just wondered whether the use of fixed penalty notices or penalty charge notices, are there cases where a business or an individual could actually just see paying these tickets, paying these off as just, you know, part of the business cost and go straight back to doing what they're doing? Are they sufficient of a deterrent, or do we actually need to progress that if they incur more than one or two of these? And then the other thing I was going to think was if this is involving a business of any sort, if there is an investigation ongoing and we are concerned, do we have any powers to actually stop the person engaging in whatever activity it is while the investigation is ongoing? Because obviously, in some cases, that I assume that may take some time. So those are my factual questions. And then just a brief comment on the CCTV. I think absolutely really important that we have clear processes, clearly written down policies about how we would use it. I do find it myself very concerning the way that these cameras are sometimes used and people don't seem to understand the limits of their use when they get them, and I don't know how much that is the council's responsibility, or could be, to actually inform people about what the limits of those rules are. That's probably not directly related to this.
Okay, thank you for those. Certainly, so in respect to the first one, FPNs, what we will do is if there is, we have had individuals who, to some extent surprisingly, have actually received more than one FPN for littering, particularly cigarette litter, and what we have to make a judgment there as to whether, if that's not working as a deterrent, whether actually we should go straight to Magistrates Court under the Single Justice Procedure and deal with it. What you have to balance is what that fine would then be and the effort involved. So I think we'd take a case-by-case basis on it. In that it's fairly rare in terms of some of the smaller offences. In terms of the levels and the deterrent, you may recall we did a review of fixed penalties last year. I think it was 2020, well, it might have been back into 2024. It will be something that we will review again this year. And we made some quite significant changes, and we're still reviewing what the impact of those has been, and how inelastic or elastic the payment rates have subsequently been. Because one of the issues with, if you put the FPNs up too high, I think we've all discussed before, people can then choose to not, are more likely to not pay them. You then end up going to court where you may get a smaller penalty, and actually it's taken a lot more time. So it's a balance. But yeah, so we will review those. In terms of where there's been an offence and we're taking action and we're doing a criminal investigation, it is a significant issue, that, and the other contributing factor at the minute is because of the delays in the court system, we may have actually lodged a case and are prosecuting an individual, say a rogue trading one could be an example, and it could be 2 years before that comes to court. It could be longer, and it is a discussion that we are having in the service. How do we minimise the harm in between? And there are things that you potentially can do. You've obviously got to be careful you don't prejudice the legal case, so that is an issue. But some of this is about, and part of the, for example, in rogue trading, we've just brought a new strategy for members to agree, which you've just agreed, and part of that is actually doing even more prevention work upstream, so that more residents are aware of the potential risks and challenges. So we've got a better protection agenda, and then if there is someone who still gets caught out, it's less of a common issue, and we can deal with it like that. But certainly, just in terms of potential injunctions, that there are some legal mechanisms that can be done. I mean, obviously what happens with the police is they will often arrest someone and they won't bail them. They may actually be kept on remand if it's a very, very serious offence. We rarely have that option. Some of our rogue traders actually are up for other crimes as well, and sometimes have been in prison. But it's just something that we will always look at. We'll talk to, to legal colleagues. If, for example, it's a fly tipper, it's a slightly different situation, because if they're using a van, we can try and seize that van. And, we do have surveillance opportunities as well. So I think if we got a really persistent case, we could talk to South Yorkshire Police, and we would maybe look at doing some additional surveillance or things like that. The last example I'll give is in respect of if we've got a shop selling vapes or something like that, we can carry on doing interventions on it and disruption activities. So we will do what we can. But yeah, and certainly if members ever have got a concern that there is a case that is going on, and you feel that we're not getting to court and there's still harm, by all means have a conversation with us and we'll see what we can do. But we absolutely need, the fundamental thing is preventing harm in the community. So that's what we would always try and do. And the final one on CCTV, yeah, I think anything else we can do around, promoting CCTV and, the controls required and the caution that people need to take is absolutely the right thing to do, because it's just becoming so prevalent. The fact that there are cameras now, people can get cameras, there's secret cameras, they're being put everywhere. I mean, there's an awful story on the BBC today that you might have seen. It just gives you a sense of how extensive this could be. So absolutely, I think we'll look at that as well.
Thank you. Christine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Overall, I welcome this. I think I echo what Mark Rustling said earlier on. I think it's really good that we make more public the actions we are taking, because people just think we aren't doing anything. So I think that's a really good step. And one question I have is, you know, we've got a list here of no action, informal action, fixed penalty charges, etc. Is this also really easily visible to the public, so they don't have to search for ages? And you know, it'd be good for them to see this is the process, so that, you know, the first stage isn't immediately a penalty charge notice. And I just think we do need to be clever about, we let the public know we are doing things. You might not always see it, because we might not need to get as far as a penalty charge notice. And I really welcome your approach, is we want to prevent it if we can. We don't want to have the attitude that let's just fine everybody for everything. We do want to prevent it. So I hope we can put the prevention out there so that people know what they should be doing and how to, you know, not cause the offence. And then they know the way that they'll be taken through the system. So it's really just about communication, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be doing everything we can on publicity this year. We're having a lot of discussions in service around, and we want to have further discussions with committee around what's the forward plan for comms linked to the work programme for the year. You might recall that we've recently done a public communication campaign around householders' duty of care, which was very much around the fact that a lot of people are getting caught out because they're getting people knocking on the door and saying, can I get rid of your rubbish for you? And they're thinking, well, that's okay, £50 or something, and then of course it's going around the corner and it's getting dumped. So we've done something on that. We're also going to be trying to harvest a bit more intel and feed that back via yourselves and MPs. We think there are some potential changes in the law that would really help as well on that. But this will go on the website, and we will draw people's attention to it. So we'll look at things like, can we put it on the bottom of our letters and things like that to draw attention to it. But you're right. Overall, You'll hopefully see a lot more comms this year on our interventions.
Thank you. I mean, absolutely worth emphasising the point on householders' duty of care. I believe I did that in supplementary questions at full council on Wednesday, when that came up in one of the supplementary questions. On the question of doing the comms about the amount of enforcement going on, I think we have had these discussions, haven't we, in briefings, and I think there is a little bit of caution, isn't there, from comms to say we want to be putting our best face forward as a city, don't we? And I think that's right. But you know, we also want to be saying that we don't want to be talking about the amount of fly tipping there is. But at the same time, we do want to be talking about the amount of enforcement of fly tipping we're doing, because that's really important. We want people to know, you know, that there's a significant risk of them getting caught. So I think that's a challenge we need to take away, and we need to strike the right balance on that going forward. Mary.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. One of the things that happens, and I'm sure every other councillor experiences this, that when you go to a meeting or with the public, it might be a public meeting, it might be just an informal meeting, and we talk about fly tipping and litter, and it's all about, well, can't you put more and more CCTV cameras everywhere? And people don't understand the regulations, and sometimes councillors don't understand all the regulations. And I was at a meeting on Monday where all this came up. People wanted to evict people who were fly tipping and dropping litter all over the place. And I think if we're going to do this comms, to send out a good piece of comms, can we target our organisations, our local community organisations, so that they can pass on information about what's possible in terms of CCTV and fly tipping and what we're doing about that, just in a very readable form, because they get, for example, our TARAs get people coming in complaining about this kind of thing, but they don't have the information ready to hand over. And I think that would be a good thing if we could do that, and maybe just send something out to councillors again for them to just pass on when they're in these kinds of situations. I think people do welcome the fines and want to see more of it, in fact, and want to be stricter on that. And just an example, one chap sent me a video of somebody fly tipping a mattress down a main road at 11 o'clock at night. He got it on his CCTV camera, and he was able, he just went and told them, go and pick it up, and they did. didn't report it, but I'm not saying everybody should do that, but he felt he was able to do it because they were known to him. But thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, one thing I can say, and it's a practical thing that we're just developing now. But you know that as part of the fly tipping reduction strategy that members approved, I think it's December 2024. We've got now a very active fly tipping reduction working group with reasonably senior reps from all the relevant services. And one thing that we've identified as that is that we needed to do more hearts and minds with other frontline colleagues, but that can also extend into TARAs and the groups you've mentioned to get more of that feedback around this is what's happening to your referrals, this is what we do on these cases. So there's now going to be a regular sort of fly tipping reduction bulletin that's going to be going out that is both for council staff, but it's also for partners, and I think that will say what we're doing, the powers, how you can help. We'll link it to the environmental toolkit, and I think it will really help produce better evidence referrals, because that's a big part of it, but it will also make it much clearer that we are getting involved in things, and that residents can have, and businesses can have confidence that we are taking it seriously and we are making a difference, and I think we are. So yeah, but I appreciate that. You've made me realise that we can extend that into those wider groups as well, and all members, so we'll do that. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Mark, did I come to you before? I did, good. Have you indicated again, though? Okay, we'll go to Peter first, and then you can come back.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, I do welcome this work. I was wondering, in terms of the enforcement, we're all excited about the enforcement happening for dog mess and for fly tipping and things like that, which we talked about and signed off on full council yesterday. Do you feel that there's also a similar need for more proactive action on domestic log burning, sort of solid fuel wood burning in the home? As we know, that's one of the big public health problems of the city, polluting people inside their own homes. And as a council, do we have a duty to, in our comms, educate people so that we prevent them from harming themselves?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So members may be aware that there is a public consultation out at the minute in respect of log burning, and I think we had a question at full council on that. So, and we've said yes, we will be responding to that consultation. I think the evidence is that it's a growing issue. We've dealt with some of the big sort of macro industrial pollution, and now we're finding that people come back to their homes and their streets, and actually the SO2 and other levels, particulate levels, are actually quite high because of inappropriate log burning. On one level, Sheffield should probably be better than some areas because of the Clean Air Acts and the fact that we've got a smoke-free zone. So the only log burners in much of Sheffield, certainly the urban areas, there's a few rural areas outside it, but much of the city, you should only be using what's called a DEFRA approved stove that doesn't allow you to damp it down quite as much. So, but notwithstanding that, there can be issues. So yeah, as part of that consultation and our forward plan this year, we will be putting out some further information on that. And again, I think going back to Councillor Lee's comment about how we can inform residents and residents groups and others, I think as part of that, what we need to do is give information out to residents groups, because I know a lot of residents groups will be quite active on this, and that might include things like what people are putting in these stoves and not over damping them down and things like that. So yes, I would see that there will be more work done on that. We do respond to all complaints on this. It's rare that we have to take action because in our experience, most cases when people realise that there is a problem, they will tend to modify the behaviour, be more careful with them. But obviously putting in for the consultation, it'll be interesting to see what legal changes do come out of that. But it certainly is a significant issue. I suspect there's a degree of lack of awareness on some streets that just how bad their air quality may be getting if everybody puts one of these devices in. So, yeah, that's, I think, what we need to be doing.
Thank you. Just on that, so as you'll all be aware, there was a question to me from Councillor Johnson, wasn't there, at full council on prosecutions for clean air, which might be not necessarily the same thing as regulation of log burning stoves, but obviously I guess they can overlap, or can they? If you have an approved log burning stove, does that mean you're in the clear, or can you still be? Is clean air? Does the clean air offence still apply?
If you've got an approved device, you can't be prosecuted for operating a non-approved device, but it doesn't give you a pass out for causing a problem entirely. Ultimately, if you are still operating that in an inappropriate manner, and if it's badly maintained or you're using the wrong fuel, they can still, cause problems. And over time, they degrade and things like that. Although they often degrade to actually letting more air in than less. So yes, it doesn't actually give you a pass out. One thing I didn't mention is that in terms of the awareness, I think there's been research that some of you may have seen, and this might help us, but if you don't mind, it's going back to the previous question, is that in getting out the comms, I think we need to be letting people know that internal air pollution is massively increased when you've got a log burner, and I think a lot of people don't realise that if they knew that the risk to their own health from having one in their own living room, every time they open that door, it's like being stood by a 5-lane motorway almost. And I think as more people appreciate that, we will see reduction in use, because that could be really significant, particularly when you've got quite well-sealed homes as well. So.
Yes, no, I recall an article in The Guardian a few years ago now by George Monbiot about having installed wood burners because he thought that was the future environmentally. Now lives in a lived in a freezing home because he learned out how dangerous they were and don't ever like them. So, and in the context of a wider realisation that it's not a sound environmental solution on all sorts of grounds. And this is why I did propose, like I said, at SNR a few years ago, an amendment to local plan that where it says renewable heat or whatever, that isn't taken to include wood burning stoves. Would have appreciated more support from other groups at the time, but anyway, let's move on from that, because I mean the planning office, to be fair to them, said it's not necessary to actually say that the policy is adequate to cover it. I hope they're right. I hope when we get applications coming in, and people say, "Was this renewable heat?" because that that doesn't get accepted in planning terms. We will see, won't we? So just to round this off, I know I've got Mark to come back. So I did say in response to Councillor Johnson's supplementary question that even though there haven't been any prosecutions for air quality, that's not the only enforcement option. And you talked about just talking to people. I guess that I don't know if there are any of the other options in the menu have come up with in relation to air quality. Is that was my answer correct? And I know, Christine, are you on behalf of Douglas Johnson, are you happy with that as an outcome, that even if we aren't prosecuting, there are these other interventions coming in?
I think we've raised the issue again here. We just want to make sure that we are looking after our air in Sheffield and we're not forgetting to prosecute. So, but I think it's really clear we've got a process, and if, as Ian says, people are being talked to and they realise what they're doing, they stop doing it, and if they don't stop doing it, then they get a warning letter. And I do know several of those letters have gone out warning people, and as long as these are followed up, I'm happy with that approach, I think.
Thank you. All right, Mark, do you want to come back?
Thank you for the indulgence, Chair. Ian, some years back, it's on the environmental options and the no actions. I remember Mary kind of made me think about this one. There's a particularly vocal individual in a location in my ward who we found fly tipping, who was very vocal about other people fly tipping, and having received a fine, asked whether he could somehow not pay this fine or whatever. I remember at the time suggesting that, well, it'd be more beneficial to me if you went on the front of the Star saying, I've been caught for fly tipping and I'm really, really sorry. But I think at the time the conversations were somewhat along the lines of, well, if we didn't enforce the fine, we wouldn't necessarily be able to enforce fines in that area because we'd chosen not to for a particular period of time. Now, I don't know whether I'm misremembering that. So if we have gotten to the issue in a fine, but we then decide not to pursue it, does that then affect our ability to pursue fines going forward? Or would we still be able to issue fines and still enforce them, even if were lenient on one individual for whatever reason? Or are we just opening up a worm of judicial reviews on those bits?
I think, as we've set out in the policy, I think we always have to keep an open mind, and it's always a case that there can be evidence that comes to light. It could be a medical issue, it could be something like that, that means that we may withdraw an FPN, and that's probably no different to, say, a parking fine or something like that. So we will always keep an open mind. One of the big issues with FPNs, and this is in advice you'll see from government as well, is that if you're not very robust in terms of pursuing people who don't pay FPNs, it undermines the credibility in the whole system of FPNs and leads to much greater costs and non-compliance. So if people think they can get away with just forgetting about the fine or not paying it, then people very quickly get to know about that, and then you don't actually you don't get the compliance. And obviously, just to bear in mind that an FPN, certainly the ones that we're issuing, are largely just a disposal route instead of court action. People actually can choose not to pay them, and then it's all that happens is we then decide whether we would then go to court on that case, and we invariably would. But if there was a case like that again, and I think I can recall the case actually, I think it would just depend on the circumstances. There'd have to be a very good reason for why we treated someone differently to another, if it wasn't a medical reason or something like that.
Thank you. I'm going to have to go now, and then I'll come to Peter. So a couple of things. Obviously, on Wednesday, you'll be aware, we approved the powers at full council for the delegation to Doncaster for littering and dog fouling enforcement kind of service project. So have they started? It was 2 days ago, but let's know. You know, what's the timescale on that? But B, how does that fit in with the wider strategy in this report? Because if somebody who's tasked with enforcing littering and dog fouling stumbles across a case of severe fly tipping, what do they do if they're not already part of our service, but a part of the service we've contracted out?
Thank you for that question. So yeah, it was great news, and again, I'd like to pay tribute to Dan Wheatman, who's put a tremendous amount of effort on that to get that through the process and the work with Doncaster and Wise. So in terms of setup, we think they're going to need about 6 to 8 weeks to get boots on the ground. There's been a lot of work done in the intervening period to just make sure, you know, where's the van going to go, and cameras and things like that. In terms of the contract, there is a clause in the contract, and other councils have, I believe, used it, where they can be... Obviously, the fines from the FPNs are helping fund this, and it's nil cost to us. But there is an option that if we want to use them to go looking for things, or in a particular ward where we want just a presence, there is also like a day rate within that that LACs and others could pay. So that's one particular thing. So I suppose as part of that, your specific question of what if they see something? Well, they are enforcement officers, so if they were there on that particular basis, it's very easy because they would just be gathering evidence. So they can gather evidence, but I think the idea is this is how we're starting, and we will then look if there are opportunities where we could, you know, potentially expand that. So I think it's down. The current contract will start some renewal arrangements over coming months, and I think as part of that, we'd obviously explore things on fly tipping and things like that. But I think in terms of the evidence, we can use evidence from most people for fly tipping. You know, if we get a statement, you can be a member of the public and provide us with evidence. In fact, a lot of evidence, going back to what we've just said about the the doorbells, if you think about it, evidence can be gathered from lots of things. So we will be integrating with them in terms of when they're out and about. If they do see any other things, can they let us know? So there will be eyes and ears. So I think that's how it will work. And obviously in terms of just, the enforcement policy and things like that, it's fairly standard stuff in terms of FPNs and things like that. But any formal prosecutions do come back to us. But their experience, I think, as part of the previous briefings you've heard, there were very, very few formal prosecutions for things like litter.
Okay, my other question is very, very broad, but let me put it this way. Are we winning? And after this strategy is we've brought in, will we then be winning? Or, will we still be losing? Or are we losing now? Is there an amount of resource that would actually make the difference that is necessary? Or an amount of resource that you have above what you need in order to be winning?
Right, are we winning? Yes, we are winning. Obviously, that's a very broad question because this particular area covers a whole series, licensing the whole of environmental regs apart from private sector housing. And I think through our briefings and the other committee reports we've brought, I think we can show that we absolutely are winning in many, many areas. I think it's fair to say that there's some areas where we're holding the line, and fly tipping is a particular challenge because macroeconomic issues will always affect things like fly tipping. And we've seen there that as businesses, for example, have been squeezed, they're more likely to stop paying for pest control, they'll stop paying for waste services and things like that. So we do get buffeted by some of those, macroeconomic circumstances. But I think there's a strong commitment, as you've seen across the whole council with the new corporate plan, and how we're working together with communities to really make sure that we're as productive as we can be, and that we're getting the best outcomes for the money that's been invested. So, I hope you'll see from the briefings that we do that we're constantly looking at what best practices, how can we learn, how can we work better with residents, how can we reduce costs and the barriers to doing work with us. But certainly to get the standards we want across the whole city, we've had previous discussions on things like the environmental toolkit and that. The only way we will deliver the environmental improvements we want across the whole city and the standards is by working closely with residents and businesses. And that's obviously a major part of the community strategy that has been approved by the council recently. There are, probably the final thing to say is, we all know there are very particular hotspots that are extremely challenging. And I would say that even there we're holding the line. However, we will and are constantly looking at how can we change, how can we do things better? If what we're doing is not giving us the results we want, how do we change that? So, and I don't think we are suffering worse than other cities. I think we're often more creative than some of the work I see going on elsewhere. So I think that would be my view. So
thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that view. Interesting that more economic growth would help. On that note, Peter, don't you agree?
I think that growth in well-being and quality of life is certainly important, Joe. Ian, is there, do you think, enough resources at the council currently, within your department, for looking at air quality? So my question is simply, would more resources help you, or is it that the work you're already doing is sufficient and adding more resources wouldn't help?
Well, it's probably fair to say that in terms of air quality planning, that doesn't actually sit in my area. So because traditionally, once the major industrial pollutants were tackled, most of the pollution has been traffic related in terms of public health significance, from the streets. So that area moved out of environmental health and went into more the transport area because it was around, large scale traffic planning and things like that. So although we do have a role in it, in terms of the broader drivers, we're not actually leading that piece of work. So you have to ask them in terms of their resource, in terms of that macro planning for general air quality. But in terms of the work we do on air quality, sort of from smoke, bonfires, polluting processes and things like that, the work that we do with factories, that's part of a permitting scheme, so we are funded for that. I think there's sometimes arguments as to whether the permits fully actually cover the cost of the work we do. That's probably a slightly different discussion. So in terms of that industrial pollution, we are funded for that. You might want a conversation with the Environment Agency as to whether they're fully funded for the work that they need to do, and I know there's a lot of national discussion on that. But certainly in terms of our environmental protection team going out and dealing with bonfires and things like that, I'm not aware of a worsening situation there in terms of customer feedback that we're not tackling those nuisances. Obviously we'd get ombudsman complaints coming on that, and I'm not aware of ones on air quality. So I think we've got adequate resource to deal with that. I think this issue around log burning and things like that, that is something that will be in our business plan for the year. It might be something we bring back to members as part of briefings for a discussion if it comes out that actually this is starting to become a bigger issue. But our whole ethos is we are unlikely to get the funding to do absolutely everything we need across the board. So actually, how can we work, again, corporate plan, together we get things done? How can we work better with communities? Councillor Lee's point again, what information do communities need? I mean, I'm convinced the more people realise how poor indoor air quality is, when you've got a log burner, the problem will probably go away because you know, people
don't want to poison themselves.
Yeah, they're not. And then, you know, if you said to someone, "I want you to every evening, I want you to smoke these 3 cigarettes while you're looking at this nice warm fire," you know, they'd think you were mad. And yeah, that's potentially the health effect that they're having. So I think it's something's around communicating it in the right terms and getting it across to people.
Thank you.
So that's what we'd like to do.
That's really appreciated. So yeah, I would just like to reiterate, the Green Party supports, very much supports and is in favour of greater enforcement over air pollution wherever it comes from. And we'd like to add how we enforce this more effectively to the work plan of this committee.
Right, is that proposal? Okay. So I was going to say, I've got Mary to come in, and I was going to wrap up. But you're making a proposal to add something to the work plan, because I thought that's what this paper is. I'm a little bit unclear what, other than what's in this paper, is that you're asking for.
It's a really good point there, Joe. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this proposal, but I think that I would like as a separate issue to have air pollution and how we deal with it after the consultation.
Okay, well, obviously we'll have discussions on our response to the consultation, which obviously will touch on some of these issues, won't it? So we've got that discussion to come, haven't we, within briefings for this committee. I think it's perfectly happy to have add to our agenda for briefings a further discussion on what else we can do about air quality. That seems perfectly reasonable. If you're happy with that, does that need to go on the work programme if it's a discussion in briefings, or, I mean, it can do, can't it? But go on the knowledge briefing. Yeah, knowledge briefing item. Okay. So I've got Mary. Yes, Mary. And then if we can wrap this up.
Yeah, just going back to fly tipping and litter and communication with people out there in local groups, and I think it is, if we can foster an atmosphere of local groups being as not responsible, but working with everybody, all working together with our local partners and council officers. And I know we have good relationships with our environmental services officers in my ward, and they work really hard, and I hope you can pass that back to them as well. I think, you know, they're there, do work in difficult circumstances sometimes, and obviously dealing with all sorts of people, but working with our local, and that is down to councillors to work with local groups, particularly where we know we've got problems. I know in some parts of the city it's not such a problem, but I know in mine ward it is, it can be a problem. But yeah, if we can have help with doing that, that would be great.
Okay, I'm getting nods for that. Thank you. All right, can we agree this item? Recommendations are on page 31, that we approve this policy. Is that agreed? That's silence. At the end of the meeting, that is agreed. Thank you very much. Item 9, Sheffield Women and Girls Nighttime Safety Charter Review. This is on page 51 of the main agenda pack. If you want to come to the table, thank you. Introduce yourselves and present the report. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Claire Bauer. I'm Service Manager of Licensing, General Licensing. So we're here this morning to present the refreshed Safety of Women and Girls Charter and to seek your approval to launch the updated version. You'll probably know that a nighttime safety charter was first introduced in Sheffield in 2022. Since then, we've continued to hear from women and girls who use the city centre, both for work and leisure, that safety concerns extend far beyond the nighttime economy. This feedback, combined with emerging best practice, highlighted the need to refresh and broaden the scope of the Charter. Over the past year, our colleagues in communities have undertaken extensive consultation across the city. This has included discussions through the Violence Against Women and Girls Forum, dedicated sessions with Sheffield Hallam University student survivors groups, South Yorkshire Police and local campaigns such as Cat Calls of Sheffield. Their insights have been essential, and many elements of the Charter, such as the do's and don'ts for business, were co-produced directly with women and girls who use the city centre every day. The updated Charter sets out 7 commitments for businesses and organisations to drive positive change and ongoing learning. It offers practical guidance, examples, links to local support and a straightforward framework for addressing harassment. Licensing will maintain a register of businesses that sign up and will be promoting the Charter widely as part of a joint effort between the Council and city partners. There are no financial, legal or environmental barriers to adopting the refreshed Charter. It is voluntary and all required activity will be delivered within existing resources. In conclusion, the refreshed Charter reflects strong and meaningful consultation, incorporates current evidence and best practice, and strengthens our citywide commitment to ending violence against women and girls. It promotes shared responsibility across businesses, partners and the wider community, and supports Sheffield's ambitions as a White Ribbon accredited city. For these reasons, the report recommends that the committee approve the refreshed Charter. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Right, it's probably more a question for our legal team on Monday morning, but I just think this is excellent stuff. It's great. We should be encouraging it. It'd be great to see more businesses taking part. But in terms of licensing, I'm just thinking whether we could actually mandate this as a condition, or if not, strongly encourage applicants to adopt these, and as members on the board even mention it at meetings, because this would, for me anyway, go a long way to showing that they are complying with the licensing objectives. So feel free to respond to that, but I will have a word with the legal people on Monday and see how much pressure we can put on applicants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd agree with that. And yeah, let's ask that question to the legal team. I know that there are issues around applying blanket conditions, but as you rightly mentioned earlier, that we can add other conditions such as Challenge 25. So if this is relevant to a premises that we're aware of in the city centre, maybe it is something that we could put as part of the application process. So yeah, let's ask that question.
Thanks. I've got Christine, Sue, and sorry, which Mark was it? Right, Mark, okay. Christine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, we welcome this charter and everything that's in it. And there's really not an awful lot more to say. I just wonder how much this works outside of the city centre, because of course women and girls travel all over the city and they don't just go to venues in the city centre. And I know this mainly focuses on the city centre. So how much awareness is there from venues outside of the city centre? And how do we promote this again with public transport and things just so that it's widely known that this is what we expect in Sheffield, and this is how we want all women and girls to feel safe wherever they go and however they travel in Sheffield.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as part of the consultation that was picked up, that it does go wider than the city centre, it does go wider than the nighttime economy. We're talking about places that aren't licensed, we're talking about places that transport hubs, for example. So we're going to try and promote it as widely as possible, and we're going to take every opportunity to do that. So we're already talking to colleagues in other departments. We've already got the media team behind us to do some publicity about it. So it's going to go a lot further than just the city centre, we hope.
I'm actually going to jump in there because my question was similar. I mean, yeah, it does strike me as a document as being focused on licensed premises in the city centre, and that is a small part of the overall picture, isn't it? I noticed the other day an article again in the Guardian. I don't just read the Guardian. Don't regard me as some sort of Guardianist or anything. Talking about Anna Sabine MP was complaining about the National Planning Policy Framework, that it didn't say anything about safety for women and girls in terms of design of public spaces. Now, as a local authority, we have a responsibility on design of public spaces. We have there was a petition that came to full council probably 5 years ago now from a group called Our Bodies, Our Streets, asking for public spaces to be co-designed, to just design them in a safer way. This charter doesn't deal directly with that, but what we do, if I can expand the context of this discussion, if you'll forgive me, what are we doing about that, and how does this fit in?
Morning, everyone. My name's Alison Higgins. I'm the Domestic and Sexual Abuse Commissioning Manager. So my team works on the White Ribbon campaign, and we are in the process of getting a new action plan together. And I think that it's very, very good points that you're making, Councillor Otten. And I think that as part of the White Ribbon campaign, I think we need to get the tendrils of this into every bit of the council. And I do know that colleagues in parks and recreation have done quite a lot around designing women-friendly and girl-friendly spaces. We had a funding stream a few years ago where some work was done at the Ponderosa with Our Bodies, Our Streets. So I think we just need to keep looking for those opportunities, but also build it into our White Ribbon plan, because it's got to be a cross-council responsibility, and because it's bigger than my little team and Claire's team, so we have got to get those tendrils out. But I think that we've got a strategy on violence against women and girls from surviving to safety, and a big element of that is on prevention. So again, it's about sort of getting those real partnership efforts across the council and beyond. But it's not an easy task, but I think it's something that we just need to build into those plans and actually make concrete over the next few years.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think if I suggest an alteration of the local plan at this point, my colleagues will probably have me shocked. But no, thank you for that, please. I appreciate that work that you're talking about. Where was I down my list? We'd had David, hadn't we? We'd had Christine, and we were on to Sue, wasn't it? Is it Sue next? Yeah, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. Very much appreciate the work that's gone into this, and it is really important. So I've just got a couple of points and questions. I think just following on from what's been said, I think this is a big city, and we have lots of venues that people would go to at night, because I think at night is when people feel most vulnerable, in more generally, across the city, and therefore getting this message out to them as much as the venues we have in the city centre is really, really important. A couple of things I specifically wanted to ask about. One is about this scheme, which I've seen advertised on buses about, and I think it may be this one that's here in the report called Strut Safe, where you can get someone, you ring someone up and they sort of effectively stay with you. I'm slightly worried about people walking along, staring at their phone and not being aware, but I'm sure they've thought that through. I just wondered how widely is that advertised, because I think that might be something that, if it was me, I might find supportive, I think, as much as anything. Because as I said, I've seen it on buses, but I'm not sure I've seen anything about it anywhere else. The other thing I wanted to ask, which is perhaps more important, is I know the last time we discussed this issue, I raised the Ask Angela campaign, the Ask Angela service, I suppose it is really, and whether we were actually investigating whether it was working, because there had been an issue at the time about it not, about them doing some trials around pubs and the staff not being aware of it. And firstly, I just wondered if we've done any of that again. And also, I did hear on, and I'm pretty sure it was on Look North, and I'm pretty sure it might have been Wakefield, but it may not have been, where they'd done that and actually got some really good results. They'd actually gone out to pubs and, done trials and testing, customers testing. And I just wondered if we have done any of that, and if not, if we could. Thank you.
On Strut Safe, that's a relatively new campaign, and it's a national campaign. It's not something that got initiated in Sheffield. It came out of the drinks companies, is my memory. So some of the industry, the women working in the industry, worked together to develop that campaign. We had them come to our VORG forum, our Violence Against Women and Girls forum, probably sort of first half of last year. And because we wanted to know more about it and sort of check out that it was kind of a robust offer, really, and what the kind of safeguarding offer was, etc. So what if something goes wrong when somebody's on the phone to somebody? And we got various reassurances. The police were involved in that discussion as well. So as a result of that, we've put them into this document because we feel that it is an offer that we're happy to promote. We didn't want to just promote it without finding out more about it, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it is a good offer, but we're not part of that comms campaign. That's what they do themselves. I saw it this morning, actually. I saw it on one of the electronic notice boards this morning. So I think it's just generally a good thing. And we've got contacts with them. So if there were any issues, we can flag them. But it seems like just generally a good thing. I know it was promoted at Tramlines as well this year. In terms of Ask for Angela, we feel relatively confident that we are in a good place with Ask for Angela, in that when it was set up, some areas just sent out a load of posters, and then bars and venues put them up, and some people still do just do that, obviously, because we can't sort of legislate on what they put up in their bars. What we do is we work with a charity called CGL, their 1625 charity, which is about young people in the nighttime economy, and they provide training around all sorts of issues around the nighttime economy. And so we've worked with them on a training pack that they then promote around Ask for Angela. So what we say is that if you want a local poster that we've produced for Sheffield, then you have to have that training first, and that involves the premises basically coming up with a protocol. So it's not just a kind of tick box, we're just going to stick the posters up. They do actually have to think about, well, what are they going to do if somebody asks for Angela, and have a process in place and commit to that. And I think when it was in the media last year, I think it was about the areas that hadn't done that. But I'm not trying to say that that's an easy thing, because getting venues to commit to coming to the training can be an issue. So we had a training day cancelled last year. We had one that went, a few that went ahead, but we had to cancel one because we didn't get enough take up. And I think that is partly because it's very hard for the nighttime economy out there. They're very busy. They're under a lot of pressure. But again, we can carry on as we push out the charter. We can continue to promote that training, but I think that's our way of coping with that. In terms of the mystery shopper idea, that's something we talked about. It's just resources, but we will continue to talk to our possibly get some volunteers through our Violence Against Women and Girls forum and talk about it there, because it's just the resources issue.
Do we have, just on that, do we have any sense of how often Angela does get asked for?
When we first launched it a few years ago, before the pandemic, we did get examples of that, of various venues saying that it relies on the venues telling us, it relies on the venues recording it and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a scientific thing, but it is used. I mean, it is something that is, you see it on media a lot more now. I've seen it in drama series, I think it was the last one I saw was on Blue Lights. There was somebody was asking for Angela, to the police actually, just sort of using it as a kind of code term. So I think it has become a lot quite well known in popular culture. Obviously, there's a downside to that as well, isn't there? Because then perpetrators and people causing abusive behaviour know about it as well. But I think it's out there. I think it's probably fairly well used, but I've not got a scientific answer for you on that one, I'm afraid.
I mean, that last point is really interesting because it's a request for assistance, isn't it? Is it, can I have some assistance here? And so my question, if we had a sense of how often it's invoked, is, I mean, obviously, if somebody might just go up to the bars and say, "Can I have some assistance out with this problem?" without using the code word Angela, there's no, there shouldn't be any rule saying you've got to use the code word or you don't deserve it. So I'm just curious because when I first heard of it, I thought, okay, this is a code word. You might be overheard. This is something you can use. All the perpetrators won't know about it, and therefore that's why it'll work. And I think if you're putting up posters, word gets out. It's on television. That's very different. So I kind of wonder how useful the code word is anymore, and whether we should be saying just ask for assistance or something, and licensed venues, etc., have a duty to help you. Like you say, reach out to transport hubs.
It's one of those things, because it's out there, it feels like we can't pretend it's not out there, if you see what I mean. So what we don't want is somebody to go to, exactly like that media stuff, and go to a bar and say, I need to speak to Angela, and the bar staff go, what are you on about, So I think because it's out there, that's why we continue to roll out the training. But we also say that if you want to use other forms of, so some venues have put up WhatsApp numbers, things like that, so venues can be creative, but they still need to know that if somebody asks for Angela, that they need to do something, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, thank you, that's really useful. Mark?
Thanks. I mean, really, really welcome this. I'm a White Ribbon ambassador. I think it's really positive. I'm just frankly appalled by the statistics on page 64. It's just an extraordinary epidemic of violence, really. A couple of suggestions and questions. Have we worked with I'm thinking of places where we can get these messages out into kind of probably quite blunt messages, really, for public consumption, but both football clubs obviously got enormous numbers of people going through them every other week. That would be really useful. And also then on a slightly more positive side, making sure that we recognise the businesses that really are doing this. I think the example there of giving a WhatsApp number sounds a really sensible one. These are things we could do an information sharing of saying, like, they're doing it, why can't you? It's almost certainly free, isn't it, ultimately? And then also just when we're recognising through things like Best Bar None and stuff like that, recognising the venues that really are doing a decent job and trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, the football clubs, we've been doing some work to try and link up with around White Ribbon. So that's something that it's on our ongoing, work list, really. And that's through the equalities team with the external equalities bit of that work. In terms of good practice, the aim is to have a kind of biannual kind of get together of and sharing good practice of whoever's signed up, and invite them to something where people could showcase how things are working well for them. So I think that's exactly what we're planning to do, basically, but also use that as an opportunity to talk about problems and challenges as well, but really, use it primarily to share good practice.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this. It's really good. And I suppose in these kinds of venues, the danger is alcohol and other other things might be present, which makes it more likely that people, if they're inclined to harass people, that will do that. And have been told that some people might, you know, they harass a young woman who fights back, who not would have been physically, but will tell them where to get off, if you like. And that then triggers something else in that person, and that can result in a more serious situation happening, and violence might occur. And I know that can be an issue. But it also goes beyond, doesn't it? We know that it goes beyond these sort of venues, but they are the ones that are quite dangerous. But, you know, to schools and youth clubs and wherever, we need to raise awareness about these issues, particularly with young men and young lads. So, and I know there's a lot of work going on. I know Youth Services produced a film a couple of years ago, which was really excellent and really touched people, and it was quite an emotional film, and I thought got to the heart of some of this. But I just wondered, you know, in terms of these venues, the bars and the clubs, how receptive are they to this? They've got a million things to think about, and they're busy people. How seriously do they take it? I guess that's my question.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of aware young women working in the industry, actually, and I've always been, when I've been involved in Ask for Angela training, I've always been like pleasantly surprised by the amount of awareness, actually. And you think about, you know, the young people that have, you know, quite highly educated working in the nighttime economy now because of difficulties getting jobs elsewhere. But I think there's probably, we're pushing an open door with a lot of places, but I think there's always going to be places that are less interested, and I think that's what we'll have to tackle together. And I think Councillor Barker's suggestion might be one way of, you know, I think there'll be a lot of places that will be dead keen and will want to be part of it, and others that won't, and we'll just have to find levers. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the actual staff working on the bars aren't interested. It might be more the managers and owners. So, but that'll be something we can work on together, I think. But we are doing lots of. We've got a healthy relationship task and finish group at the moment, and that's working on trying to pull together all the efforts that are going on in the city around that proper prevention stuff around attitudes of children and young people. But we've also managed to support quite a lot of schools now. I think we've got 20 odd schools signing up to White Ribbon, which is feels really, really positive.
Thanks. Mark Jones.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the report. Really, really interesting stuff. Following on from a couple of questions that we've had from the room, it kind of like ticked off some of the stuff that was going through my head. It's the training and recording element of it more than anything. And from what David and Sue said, and Joe picked up on a little bit, it's more of a kind of a comment from you guys as to what you feel. Certainly with the Think 25 stuff, if stores fail a shopper coming in and buying something as they do, or all the rest of the stuff, the shops would rely on their Think 25 records for any future prosecutions or in licensing as to whether they'd be granted a permission. Do you inspect the records from businesses to see that they are keeping records and that those records are being escalated? Because I get that within this it kind of says that if someone went up to the bar and said, I've got an issue with a gentleman over there or an individual over there, they're being an idiot, I need some help, and they go away, does it still get flagged to the police? Does it need the individual who's being harassed to actually want to take this further? If we are then seeing that there are repeated issues in certain bars, and I know that some may not want to record that and may not want to keep it with us, but surely it should be part of their requirements to prove that they're a venue that's worthy of being licensed. I'm wondering, have we got resources to do that, or would it simply be a turn-off to businesses if they thought, well, I have to report this and it might not go well, they wouldn't want to participate in it? I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the balances between having a written record, having that written record recorded, and actually evidencing how it's being taken forward to make sure the society is getting safer, or or whether it is really safer. There's a lot in there for you to unpick, so sorry for that. Sorry, Chair. I have a habit of rambling questions. Sorry, mate.
Really interesting rambling question. I'm going to come in, but
Yeah, completely agree. This charter we would like to see as educational, supportive. We don't want it to be a big stick to beat people with. If people are signing up to it, then that's great and we'll support them. We want people to collect those records, to keep those records. I mean, every example of harassment is going to be different. So some might be quite low level, making people uncomfortable. Fine but there'll be different levels of escalation, and that will be down to each incident and whether it reaches the police or not. We want the charter to be spread throughout venues, so not just the bar staff, not just the management. We want door staff to know about it. Any external companies that are coming into that venue should know about it. Everybody working in that venue should be aware of it. So yeah, I think we can check those records during an enforcement exercise, just like we would with the underage sales records, just like we would with any training records. We probably will put that as part of our enforcement regime as this gets rolled out a little bit more and venues are more used to it and understand what they can put into place. We'll definitely support them with that. But like I say, I don't think we'll ask them to report in. I don't think we'll use it as a big stick, but at the moment it's very much educational and supportive.
thanks. I mean, yes, what's the thought that Mark's question prompted me to have was, like you say, there are levels, aren't there? And we're not saying this is only for, you know, things that are really serious that you might want to involve the police in. Is it fair to say, look, if somebody is invading your personal space, if they're ringing alarm bells in your head for whatever reason, you feel unsafe, you want to get out of there, that's perfectly reason enough to say, can I have some assistance here? Is that fair? And it doesn't have to be a police incident. It doesn't have to trigger a whole cascade of events. It's just I'd like to get out of here.
Yeah, it could be anything. It could be just somebody feeling uncomfortable and unsafe and wanting support, and it's helping those venues know how to support.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess the question is how I don't know how clear that is in terms of, you know, the whole offer and the whole programme, but that's a question. Peter.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I'd noticed there's not any reference in the Charter to the Safe Square programme that we have. I was wondering your thoughts on that. I understand, obviously, that the Safe Square has only secured funding until April this year, and whether that was part of not including it in, say, the list of support services. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think it's because we haven't got confirmation about how long it's going to be continuing for. I mean, we can put it in and say that the council supports, a Safe Square offer, as and when this is available. But I suppose it's just finding the right wording, isn't it? But I can talk to colleagues about that and think about how to put that in.
All right. Can we move to decision on this? Are we happy to agree that the recommendations are on page 53 to approve the attached refresh charter? Is that agreed? Take silence and, in fact, all the nods as the assent of the meeting. That is agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Item 10, City Centre Place Management Plan. This is on page 93. Yes, Ben, if you'd like to introduce yourself and present the report. Thank you.
Morning all. Ben Brosford, Assistant Director, Street Scene Services. Firstly, just want to say that unfortunately the author of the report couldn't be here today. Unfortunately, Liam's not well. But I just want to kind of pass on my thanks for all the hard work in terms of putting together this report that we're presenting today. So, this report's all about how our city centre is changing, developing and improving really. So as the city centre is changing, there's more public realm coming on, there's more commercial buildings here, there's more things to do, there's nicer environments to be there. Our place management plan needs to adapt to those changes, and that's what this report's about. It's about kind of taking things from where we've currently been delivering things and taking on board the adaptations of those changes to keep our city centre looking great and clean and being welcoming. So it sets out a coordinated approach to improving the cleanliness, safety and overall quality of our city centre. It brings together existing services, including the city centre ambassadors, the Streets Head team, Environmental Regulations and Services, South Yorkshire Police, the Sheffield Business Improvement District, residents groups and volunteers under a clearer, unified framework for tackling issues in the city centre. So the plan's responding to the post-COVID changes in footfall patterns, the increased city centre living, the growing need for well-managed public spaces, and introduces several new or enhanced measures, including a graffiti strategy that's been updated, a commercial bin management pilot that's been rolled out recently, and it's obviously come to this committee for approval only a couple of months ago. An environmental toolkit for residents and businesses to try and improve localities, and a strengthened approach to tackling fly tipping and fly posting. A more visible back to basics standard of day-to-day cleansing is also proposed. So this report's about partnership working, which is a central element of the plan. It introduces clearer governance arrangements than we've currently got. It's about working together with joint tasking across multiple agencies and improving intelligence sharing aims to reduce duplication and support more effective deployment of resources. Performance will be monitored by defined KPIs, a new city centre insight survey where we're seeking feedback from people that are using our city centre to understand more what they're seeing, and the establishment of a city centre highways and public realm operations group. Overall, the plan's about providing a proactive and structured approach to designed to improve environmental quality, enhance public confidence and support a vibrant, safe and sustainable city centre. In terms of the recommendations, we're asking committee acknowledge the city centre place management plan 26 to 28, acknowledge the governance arrangements for delivery and performance monitoring, and note that we'll be developing KPIs which will be monitored quarterly, and obviously we'll discuss with the committee which ones might be appropriate to come to the regular monitoring performance sessions that we have.
Thank you. Hans? Mark?
Cheers. Thanks, Ben, and the team for all the work on this. I think it's useful to have it all in one place. Couple of comments, really. First, I think there needs to be a direct link between this work and the work that we're doing on the district centres as well, both in terms of what we learn from this, well, both ways, really, but I don't think we can have the case where we put all of this effort into the city centre, but we don't in our district centres. So I think that's important. And then just a plea to getting the basics right of things like, particularly the volunteers. That there's nothing that annoys volunteers, and we'll have all volunteered in our areas, than seeing the bags there a week later and they haven't been picked up. I know I did a session, it's not the city centre, but did a session with the Friends of Concord Park and Woolly Woods last weekend. We picked up over 30 bags, including a wide array of articles in those bags. They've got to be picked up, and it'll be the same in the city centre as well, because that to me is the best way of showing that we value volunteers' time and energy. So I think that needs to be front and centre there. But otherwise, I think, yeah, good piece of work. Like you say, proof's in the pudding, isn't it, ultimately? And there'll have to be a very different approach in parts of the city centre like Castlegate compared to the heart of the city. And it'll have to flex in that way.
Chair, if I can just respond to a couple of those things. I think, Mark, you're absolutely right. In terms of the city centre, it's a place where we are more used to working together across a place area. I think it's taking the stuff that we're formalising and really kind of invigorating through this plan and seeing how we can then transpose some of the outputs and outcomes from this into our district centres. So I think this and some of the work that we're doing around Gleadless Valley, in terms of the team around the place, pilot up there, and some of the work that we've done in Page Hall, Atcliffe and Darnell around kind of how do we work together better, how do we engage volunteers, how do we listen to communities and respond to their needs and not pass issues around. I think all of that needs to be kind of pulled out of this and then applied to our district centres. So I'd certainly agree we will use this as part of the basis for that work. Volunteers are very important. This is particularly around the city centre. We've got a fantastic number of volunteering groups in the city centre, supporting everything from our nighttime economy to maintaining our public realm. So again, a big acknowledgement and thank you from me for all the work that yeah, you know, we'll continue to kind of move on with them and engage with that. Thanks.
Thanks. Christine.
Yeah, thank you. I echo Mark's point. I mean, I welcome this. It's a great strategy for the city centre, but I do wish we could have it rolled out in the districts. You know, it would be fantastic. We have a lot of voluntary groups in and around the whole city, and I think they all need to feel they're part of something and working with the rest of the city. And, you know, it's just a comment, actually. I kind of, Mark beat me to it because I would have said the same thing. But one thing I noticed is that you can ask BT to enforce graffiti removal on their cabinets. Can we do that everywhere, and why aren't we doing it? Because they're an eyesore across the city, not just in the city centre. And how do we get that done? Because I would like to see that done.
Yeah, so also do you want to...
Go on, Peter, yeah, go on.
Yeah. Thank you, and I think that's really great, Christine. Really good point there. And I think it comes on to that same thing, like if we put pressure on BT, is it, to clean up the graffiti on their property, maybe then they'll be forced more to cooperate with us in terms of getting the artwork put onto their boxes, because rather than them turning up and having to clean up the graffiti, they'll have beautiful artworks in our communities, and so we won't be forcing them to come and get the graffiti off. So maybe that's a way we can work with them.
I just had a vision of the Soviet Union enforcing artwork on people when the way you put that. I'm sure that's not what you meant. I mean, I recall slightly the idea of state-enforced artwork. I do think, you know, obviously artwork on BT boxes is a great idea, led by the community. The stuff they do in Kalamani is excellent, and it'd be great to see the whole city doing their own kind of local takes on that. But sorry for that. Do you want to answer the question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so completely agree. You know, the point about engaging volunteers and then being so important in keeping our street scene clean and welcoming. And again, as part of this, as part of the pieces of work that we've done more recently, we have got that environmental volunteering strategy, which is referenced by this particular document. But that does obviously talk about the whole city, and that is a citywide thing. So, you know, we've got people in my team that are working closely with those voluntary groups to see what we can do and enhance. But yeah, that's only one element of keeping our district centres clean. So I do appreciate that. On the BT side of things, yes, encouraging BT to keep things clean when they have been graffitied is a role that we take and we push. Challenging sometimes, you know, they've got challenges around resources as we do, but I think what we need to be doing is that point of focus and that point of action. So we're the ones that's kind of keeping that going. So almost you can't ignore it because we're constantly on it, and you need to kind of make those changes. And I think that's part of some of the stuff that we play in and around the city centre, is having that approach where we can keep following up on those types of things. But coming to Peter's point, the graffiti strategy talks about cleansing, it talks about enforcement, but also it talks about prevention and doing things like having public art in places where we've got real challenges. So again, the type of thing that is in the environmental toolkit that we rolled out recently through a committee as well is really important, and we are seeing the benefits of that around the city centre, certainly, but also I think in other areas. I think Counsel referenced Kelham Island. Yeah, I mean, seeing more of that would be really welcome, and it's having voluntary groups, it's having community groups, it's having the the council coming together to facilitate that type of thing going forward. So completely agree.
Thanks. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. The graffiti element of the report, cost recovery and works in default. I remember doing some work with some of Ian's team a while back. We did some site visits, and it was a case of derelict buildings often become targets of this work. And they also become targets of flag tipping and all other environmental crimes that go on. And I remember at the time Ian was exploring the opportunities of getting partners to sell those properties or buying those properties on and all the rest, so that we can develop them. And we've seen it down the corridor coming into the city centre, where we've been buying up parcels of land and everything else. I'm kind of wondering, when it comes to those buildings that are empty, that are blighting our communities, our high street, be it the city centre or other commercial areas, what can we do to make sure that we are working with the property developers to stop them banking that work? Do we think we're being aggressive enough to make sure that where their properties are being abused across the city, that they're doing enough to secure those properties and making sure that are we just merely recovering our costs, or is there an element of fines that can be levied on these landowners, these property owners, where they're effectively causing big detriment to us and our city's development and our city's view? What can we do to really push that forward and those teams working at heights and everything else? Because we wind up putting our employees at danger accessing some of this graffiti as well. So how can we really push that forward and make sure that people are being responsible and not just land banking and the rest? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. I think it's a difficult issue to tackle. I think you're absolutely right. I think in the graffiti strategy we've pulled it together for the first time, where we've talked about the cleansing and recovering the costs of cleansing. So that's the cost recovery bit. That's the, you know, instructing the property owner to clean this off, giving them a period of time. If they're not doing that, then, you know, if that's bad enough, we can go and do that and then, you know, add land charges to it. So when that does change hands, and often if it is property that's been banked waiting to change hands, you know, we're not going to recover that money until that happens. But if it's in that state, it is in process. It's not something that's going to sit there for 30, 40 years. It's something that's going to be coming up to changing hands reasonably soon. So we will get some of that money back. But I think the fines bit is the other bit then. And again, I think, you know, for the first time in the graffiti strategy, we've talked about some of the enforcement action we can take through planning enforcement, not just environmental legislation as well. And that gives us, I suppose, a different bow to our different string to our bow, really, in terms of being able to approach it from what's the most suitable way. And I think that's the bit about the strategy, is we are genuinely engaging all parts of the council in this and partners to try and make the best of what we've got. I think proof will be in the pudding. So the report talks about kind of tracking KPIs and things like that. So I think that will be really key to prove that this is having an impact. And also in terms of kind of, you know, having somebody to own that, again, I think that's what's really key. You know, we've seen if a bit like the BT boxes, if we've got the city centre management team owning that issue, chasing it down, it tends to get resolved. It's those ones where you kind of, something comes in once and it's ignored. So I think that ownership around this, I think, is really key as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to say a few things. So first of all, I think the original impetus for this document came from there was a bid board meeting when I was on there that was discussing regeneration city centre. I had a presentation from the regeneration team. This is what we're going to do on Fargate. This is what we're going to do here. This is what we're going to do there. It's all going to be marvellous. And the board were very happy. They said, "Oh yes, it sounds marvellous. We're very good. We look forward to it immensely." Until that was everybody's view. Until the conversation, well, but what about actually the state to which it's maintained, the state to which it's, you know, littered and whatnot? because it would be a shame, wouldn't it, to spend all this money, have a really sparkling city centre, and then have it covered in litter and graffiti. So what's your answer to that? And so this is where this has come to. And so I think they were right. I think they were right to raise that. I think we're right to do this thinking about how we make sure we actually get the best value out of the investment that we put in. On the particular proposal, I just want to clarify a little bit because it talks about the city centre place management plan. Now, there isn't a separate document in here that's entitled City Centre Place Management Plan. That's talking about basically, essentially, Section 2, the proposal in this report. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Like I say, I'm very happy with it. I have some particular questions again on it. The appendices, the items of the appendices are other strategies being brought in, or other elements being brought in, the environmental volunteering strategy that we've agreed previously. The commercial bin pilot we agreed quite recently. The environmental toolkit, we've had that for a little while. The graffiti strategy, is that new, or is that we've had that for a while?
No, this is a refresh. This is the kind of the latest version in terms of today is the first time that's been presented to committee.
Right,
to see
okay.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would have been helpful to be a little bit clearer about what elements of this were new and what are just kind of being brought in. It does make sense. It does make sense to bring them in. So there are those 4 items that are in 4 of the appendices, and then there's this city centre action plan in another appendix. I could find it. See, on page 109, which again actually refers again to some of the other items that we've already talked about, and also refers to some of the items in the plan. So I guess that's I'm not entirely clear where that sits, the city centre action plan in relation to all of this.
The City Centre Action Plan is a table that helps visually pull together some of the narrative that's discussed in the report. So that will be owned by the City Centre management team and worked through with that new highways and place management operational group that's proposed in the report.
Okay, thank you for that. So again, final thing, just being kind of pedantic rather than helpful. I noticed our recommendations are to acknowledge the plan rather than to agree it or approve it. Is it something that already exists and that we're just, I mean, page 95 says acknowledge the city centre management plan, acknowledge the governance arrangements, note that progress will come to us. We're not actually being asked to decide anything, are we?
In terms of that, no, it doesn't already exist, Joe. This is it coming together, so you're absolutely right. It should be agree, approve, in terms of that.
Okay, is that, can we agree it, Rob?
Thanks, Chair. So, as you know, I'm sure Rob will talk more eloquent around this. From a governance point of view, this is very much operational, but we were clear you'd been publicly challenged in various forums, whether that be the bid and our knowledge briefing. So we thought it worthwhile actually bringing it publicly. This is what we're doing about it, but it's an operational document, hence why we're saying acknowledge it. It doesn't need a policy committee decision as such, but we want you to be acknowledging it and agree it's the right format and we're on the right path to delivering this.
Right, okay, thank you for that. That does make perfect sense. So I appreciate us being consulted on an operational matter. I think it's one of such importance that the committee are glad to do it. I've seen your hand, Peter, I've not quite finished. So then I have a reflection, just if you can respond to this, that we have the 4 or 5 elements in the appendices that are described in section 2.1, so I guess 4 of the appendices, that are particular kind of narrow elements of this. And then the rest of the plan is quite broad. It's about establishing a group. It's how we monitor, how we work together. Are there any other narrow elements that are missing? Is the question.
Not that immediately come to mind, Chair. I think what we might see is that as the group's established and works through a number of different items, there may be a need to develop more policies or procedures, but in terms of what the thing's being presented today, I don't think there's a particular gap that we've sort of thought we've not delivered on.
Okay. Okay, I'm happy with that. Except, let me just ask this: there is a, I don't know whether it comes under the umbrella of hygiene or of place management, but there is the question of the antisocial behaviour and the PSPO and all that, which is not under this committee, it's not our responsibility, but nonetheless, it contributes to the same sort of questions about the state of the city centre as does kind of the physical, the litter and whatnot. So, given that it's an operational matter, it doesn't have to restrict itself to things that under our committee. Does that belong within this umbrella, the PSPO and the ASB and things like the CCTV service, which is obviously is under this committee, as an element?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is about good management of the city centre, and that's going to break across a number of different boundaries. A lot of those boundaries are in this committee, you're right, so that's the cleansing through streets ahead and, tackling fly tipping through environmental regulation and stuff around licensing in the nighttime economy. But you're right, there isn't boundaries in terms of that operational work that we need to cross. So we have worked very closely with colleagues in the ASB team in terms of that public space protection order, and yes, it's been to a separate committee in terms of approving that and being monitored, but we are directly delivering on that very closely, and again, more than happy to do noise briefings for committee around that stuff and take stuff from this committee back and feed it into any other decision making process that's needed.
Okay. Yes. Well, yeah. I think as long as that is joined up in terms of the plan for hygiene. It's an odd word, hygiene. I mean, it's not. It's a jargon word, isn't it, for councillors and council officers? I don't know if there's a better word that we could use, but for the safe and attractive state of the city centre. So, final question from me, and then I'll come to Peter. Are we winning?
I think we've seen some marked improvements. I mean, kind of COVID-19, and coming back out of that was a bit of a reset. It perhaps felt that we were on the back foot a little bit, but I think the relationships, the impetus, the kind of desire to improve things, particularly with developments in the city centre, makes us feel like we're definitely getting there. I think, if we were already there and we'd won, we wouldn't be needing this report, would we? So there is more to do, and that back to basic stuff I think is really key. But yes, generally I think we're seeing a cleaner, safer, more welcoming city centre, both in the more established bits and in places that are changing now through Heart of the City 2, Pounds Park, which we manage well, all those types of things.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, it's similar to your mentioning of the Public Spaces Protection Order. As this is an operational document, and you mention all the partners involved in it, and it's to do with improving the environment and such like in the city centre, I was thinking, shouldn't parking services at least be a partner of this? Because, a dumped car there is kind of fly tipping, and an idling vehicle is an environmental harm in the city centre. So it's to avoid working in silos and, oh yeah, we're the parking people, but we're not involved in the city centre cleanliness. They are, aren't they? And shouldn't they be a partner in this?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Peter. Parking's in my service area as well, so it's very much something that's established as part of the working arrangements with the city centre management team, with colleagues elsewhere. That licensing, for example, we do lots of joint work around taxi licensing and enforcement and things like that as well. So, yeah, it absolutely is a key operational arm to making the city centre safe and attractive. And we'll make sure they're part of the process.
All right. Any more hands? No? All right. Well, can we agree this item? Again, recommendations on page 95 after acknowledge and note. I'll take the silence as this. Actually, no, I've been saying, can we take silence at the centre of the meeting all the way through? And the script has changed. It now says, if any member wishes to dissent, please raise your hand. So it's, no, and nobody does. Excellent. Right, so that is agreed. Thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting. Thank you all at home for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you all next time in March. Thank you. Goodbye.